Hello and welcome to the Living Philosophy 100,000 subscriber special. It's kind of crazy to be doing this, but yeah, first of all, I guess I just want to say thank you to everyone for the support and for being part of this journey. It's incredibly exciting and it's kind of crazy. First thing you'll notice is that I got a haircut, which just happened to align with the timing of all this. But I'd planned on getting it a couple of months ago before I went on Camino. But yeah, just the way it happened, it lines up with a thing. So I've got a bag of hair that I'm going to be sending to a charity that makes wigs for kids with cancer. Yeah, the hair got a lot blonder with Camino, so whole lot of hair, and it's a whole lot shorter for me now. And yeah, I actually kind of love it. It's so much better. I'll show you some pictures of me with the hair while it was getting cut, taken by my hairdresser Jen. And yeah, it's just been I can wear my hair down all the time now. Before it was so messy and gave off such a Jesus vibe. So yeah, big change there. I also, as you've probably noticed from the last few episodes, I moved into this new house or old new house. And yeah, kind of when I got back from Camino, I'd had all my food stocked up and just a lot of stuff that, non-perishables like pasta in all these bottom cupboards. And then when I came back, I was like, oh shit, it's all been eaten. So old house in the countryside, and I guess mice. The mice were eating, and so yeah, it's just been a bit of a journey with that. But I came up with this. Well, I looked up on YouTube an elaborate trap for like catching mice, so I could release them in the forest, not too far away, just like 10-15 kilometers away. And yeah, I'd come up with this trap. It was actually really clever. It was like a bar through a bin and then like a Coke can through the center with peanut butter on it. And so mouse is supposed to jump on the can and spin. But yeah, that wasn't really working. I got other humane traps, but my friend Barry, his cat had a few kittens. So he was like, take a cat. So I got a cat. And he is a bit of a handful in his own way, but he's really, I think, you can just see like the outline of him here. So he's just chilling on the chair here beside me. So his name is Freddy, because he's very vocal. So a couple of people said that to me and I was like, okay, he's getting his name from this. And he is very vocal, but he's quiet now. He's sleeping. I think he was up all night hunting mice. Hopefully. So yeah, I've delegated my work to nature, but humane traps seem to be catching more than he is. So it's a mixed bag. But he's very funny. I'll show you a video of him here. That it's just because I've never seen a real cat make these kind of noises before, but he actually just he just makes weird noises when he's eating sometimes. So this is him on my trap. Like I've seen cats on the internet make these noises. I've just never met a real cat that actually does this. So yeah, he's been a lot of fun to have around. That's been a whole adaptation. So a lot of new things happening since back from Camino. But yeah, starting to get like fully zoned back in on the channel, which is really exciting. And the creative process is starting to turn again. So I'm finding my rhythm again, which is, that's really exciting. And so it was last Friday that it crossed over into the 100,000. I was watching the countdown with my brother, which was really fun. Just refreshing it while we were chatting. He's living in Canada, so we chat quite often online, and yeah, was doing that, and then saw it cross 100,000, and then was kind of like looking for, can I get my silver play button thing? So apparently you got to wait for an email from them. which I've now gotten. So I thought I would share with you. This came through 2 nights ago, or night before last, just at 1 o'clock in the morning. So I said I'd wait to go through with it until I'm here with you. So yeah, this is the email that I got. Hard work paid off, blah, blah, blah. Reaching a milestone is something to be proud of. It's no easy feat. So yeah, I did not realize it was a diamond one. Don't know if I'll ever get to 10 million. I have sincere doubts. But anyway, let's look at this. Come over here. And then, boom, redemption code. Let's go. Redeem award. You entered an invalid code. That's not good. That's really not good. Let's try that again. Ooh. Ooh. There we go. There we go. Okay, so we're gonna go the living. It's very important not to make a spelling mistake at this point. Oh, so the living philosophy. Cool. And approve and check out. So the living philosophy. Custom product. Cool. Right, and I guess I'll fill out the rest of that. But yeah, I just thought I'd go through that with you. Kind of an exciting little thing coming. So I imagine that will be over here at some point in the next few weeks, which is really cool. Yeah, I guess that's kind of the introductions. And yeah, is there anything else to say? I don't think there's anything else to say. I suppose let's just get into the questions. A lot of really good questions, actually. Some of these are really stimulating. Some of them are just really nice comments. So yeah, don't know how long it's going to take to get through them, but obviously put all the notes in the description. First question is from TheCoachBurger, who says, congrats. I want to know, what did you take away from your ayahuasca experience? I tried ayahuasca last year and my view on existence is totally different now. For instance, I'm no longer an atheist and no longer think the universe is just random. I'd like to know if your perspective on life has changed as well. I don't actually think that ayahuasca has changed my worldview. It changed my life. It led to shifts in the direction of my life, without a doubt. Quite major ones. Because but not shifts in worldview. I think it's beginning to happen. So I think last year I did 2 nights of ayahuasca. First night was the most intense thing I've ever experienced in my life, and I was kind of just holding on for dear life. It was just really, it was just like overwhelming. But I kind of got through the night, and then the second night was like beautiful, just like overflowing with love for my grandmother, and just for my friends, my family. And at that point, a month before, I'd moved to Athens. So remember the Athens videos. And then the month after, myself was still in Athens, but that ayahuasca experience put me so much in mind of my grandmother, who was 94 at that point. And I just felt ayahuasca was just like, just go back to Ireland. It'll all work out. You'll find a house. Because the reason why I was going to Greece, aside from it being a cool place to go, was that I could afford to live there based on what I was doing with YouTube. And I was still struggling to find places in Ireland with that. So it was just like, just trust it, it'll all work out. And and it did in the end. So I think when I found this house was when I got the message from the woman in Switzerland where I did it. letting me know that there was another ceremony going on, and it was the same day. So I was like, okay, that's pretty good time, and I'm ready. So this year I went back, and yeah, I'd be back in Ireland, best part of a year, and so it was February I was going doing it, or March I was going doing it, and then in February, my grandmother had a fall. She turned 95 in January. She had a fall, and she ended up dying the week before ayahuasca. So it was like the Saturday before was when we buried her, and it was the Saturday after I was doing ayahuasca for the second night. So it was really, they call ayahuasca grandmother, and it was the call of my grandmother that brought me back to Ireland with the ayahuasca the previous year, and then this year, that's what happened. And yeah, so I really wasn't ready for ayahuasca because it was within a week of that, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it, but I was kind of horrified by the thoughts, because like my energy just had not recovered, and I just didn't know. Yeah, I dreaded the thought of the first night from last year, like that overwhelming thing. So when I took the medicine the first night and the Friday night, I was just like, oh, please, Mother, go easy on me. Please go easy on me. And yeah, I like, as I've talked about in other videos, like the synchronicity video, I talked about the tension in me between the materialist and the woo-woo, and how to, like, the struggle to reconcile those, and to, yeah, so scientific mindset, I guess, versus more of a magical thinking kind of thing. And I think with ayahuasca, I tried to have that attitude anyway, because I think going into that kind of liminal space, that kind of mindset is good. But yeah, I think what happened this year for me with ayahuasca is that actually she went gentle on me. It was two very, very manageable experiences, which, even as I was saying that night, I was just like, but it's a drug hitting your belly, like what can you really impact it? Like, is there something there that's responding? Which is what all the teachers in these traditions say, that like the ayahuasca is a teacher spirit. So there's something there. And the way the facilitator explained it to me was, you might find yourself thrown into a dark alley if you take LSD, and you might find yourself thrown into the same dark alley if you take ayahuasca, but the difference is there's a guiding hand there for you with ayahuasca, whereas there isn't with LSD. You're kind of in the psychedelic zone, but without any assistance. And yeah, I've always found those things interesting, but never. I think it takes a lot more to have some kind of like trust in that. And I think this year, with the two experiences that I had, I was like, maybe there's something here that I can trust. So it's kind of leading more into ayahuasca, I guess, and kind of learning a relationship with it. Or that's kind of the way that I'm looking at it. But definitely there was something very uncanny in the timings for me. And ayahuasca being called grandmother, and then just the nature of those experiences, and the timings of it. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's changed my worldview. Maybe it will in future. Maybe I'm laying foundations for that. But yeah, for now, I'm very grateful for it, because coming back from Greece, like, Ireland is where I want to be anyway, but it's just, I got those, those extra few months, with my grandmother. So, because every week I would go over, see her a couple of times a week, every Wednesday and Friday, and then probably see her on the Sunday as well. So yeah, just a big part of my life. She raised me and my brothers, my cousins. She was as much of a parent growing up. We spent a lot of time at hers after school, and she cooked us dinner, and it was such a key figure in my life. So yeah, incredibly grateful for ayahuasca in that sense. So I guess a much more mundane kind of experience with ayahuasca. So rather than philosophical, which I appreciate. So yeah, who knows? We'll see in the future, TheCoachBurger. But yeah, thanks for the question. And Deloidy5356, Danny asks, fantastic and well-deserved. A question, you say, do we, people and society, have too much choice? I think something with this that always comes to my mind is I read a book by Alain de Botton. You probably know from the School of Life channel. He wrote a great book called Status Anxiety years and years ago, and the second chapter in that book like really just struck me deeply. It was called Expectations, and it was all about how the expectations you develop in life are based on the range of possibility. So he's talking about if you were a serf in medieval times on a feudal estate, you weren't really suffering from this anxiety of, oh, what will I do? Or this status anxiety as much. It didn't bother you. The aristocrats didn't bother you as much because they were just operating in a different realm. So you kind of were just in relative status with the other serfs, the other people within your caste. And that, yeah, there isn't such an anxiety that comes with that because there isn't really, it's very rigid, structured society. And so much less anxiety, obviously much less possibility in that. But as we've come into the modern age and more, especially in the 21st century, the range of possibilities available to us is something else. So the people you go to school with, there's like 100 people or whatever that are going on all these different career paths and attaining all these different gradations of height and prestige. And then that is reflected to you as a possibility that that's something that you could do, and then the anxiety that comes with that. So I think, I mean, yeah, so Danny's question is, do we have too much choice? And that's kind of a line you got to draw yourself. There is a cost that comes with the amount of choice that we have. That's the way that I'd frame it. And if you want to have less anxiety, or yeah, if you prize having less anxiety, then maybe we have too much choice. But the anxiety and that status anxiety is kind of a responsibility, comes with the rights of freedom. And so we're given this freedom, and I guess it's just a different set of problems. Be covering René Girard in the next few months. I've kind of covered him in a Patreon episode a few months back, but I was reading a lot of his books at the start of the year, and I'm probably going to do a deeper read, but towards the end of the year and make an episode. So Girard would kind of say this mimesis, this imitation, where we imitate our desires through others. And our desires are mediated by others, so we're imitating the desires of others rather than wanting objects necessarily themselves, which very much fits with that thing of status anxiety, because we see what's possible and then we kind of imitate those desires based on those around us. So there's an abundance of desire in the modern world, postmodern world, and yeah, so we're drowning in all these possibilities, and FOMO has become such a big thing. I think social media is just exploded that idea of the anxiety of desire. And yeah, even Peter Thiel, who founded PayPal with Musk, or they merged their companies together to form PayPal. He was one of the early investors in Facebook, and he invested in it because he was a student of René Girard and was just blown away by seeing how people imitate desires and seeing that Facebook was going to be this desire imitation machine. So it's quite popular in Silicon Valley circles, René Girard's thinking, because that's where desire is kind of, you can see this metaphysical desire, the desire to be someone, the celebrity culture, which has become so close to us in social media, because all those people have come down to our level. So the desire machine, I think it just increases that and increases the discontent and increases the amount of desire and envy and all these challenging emotions. And so, I don't know if we have too much desire, but there's definitely an increasing cost that we're paying for the amount of freedom that we have, for the amount of choice that we have. So, maybe we have too much choice. It's quite possible. But it's not destroyed us yet, but it's certainly taken its toll on us. So thanks for that question, Danny. Next question is from Farfetched Tangmo 7474. Have the findings of physics science over the last century had much effect on philosophy and or pseudo-philosophy? And the Anthrax Biology responded to this. in the thread saying the development of quantum physics and the uncertainty principle had a very large effect on it, especially on phenomenology, which I didn't know. I've certainly come across a lot of it in pseudo-philosophy and pseudoscience stuff, especially spirituality, new age kind of stuff. I'm very suspicious and cautious around talking about quantum mechanics. It used to fascinate me. I was reading Stephen Hawking's books when I was younger and kind of, reading stuff around it. But it's really, really fascinating. But I think it's very problematic to use it philosophically because of, there's a great line in one of the Coen brothers movie, I think it's A Serious Man. And the guy is a physics professor. I think it's back in the 50s or whatever. And he has this East Asian student come in and is trying to bribe him to like pass the exam. He's like, no, I understand the cat. I like talking about Schrodinger's cat, the cat that's both alive and dead. Based on, I'm probably even butchering that by saying that, but Schrodinger's cat, the cat in the box. He says, no, I understand the cat. I just don't understand the math. And your man is like, nobody understands the cat. It only makes sense with the math. And that's really fascinating because, I think there's interpretations of the quantum stuff. And one of those interpretations that I find really fascinating is from a guy called Carlo Rovelli, who since the 90s has had this interpretation of the Copenhagen experiment, or well, not the Copenhagen interpretation is another interpretation. Anyway, one of these interpretations of quantum mechanics, which his interpretation is that it's not about things, like the fundamental nature of reality isn't things, it's about the relationships between things, which is quite mind-blowing because then the universe is viewed in terms of processes and in terms of flows rather than in terms of discrete objects. And this fits really well with studying a lot of Marx at the moment and coming out of Hegel, the dialectical principle, the principle of like transformation and the flows and the constant changing of life. So going all the way back to Heraclitus and transformation and things. So moving away from empirical focusing on single objects and getting into more focusing on the flows of potential. Really interesting. But again, well, it's fascinating philosophically. It's so dodgy, and I think I find it so dodgy because of having read spirituality books where they've invoked quantum mechanics, and I'm just like, to try and explain consciousness is fundamental to the universe and mind is the true foundation of the universe. And it's like, well, I mean, it's saying observation of so to go to the double slit experiment in quantum mechanics, it's when you try and record the electron going through which slot that the wave function collapses into. Basically, it's a recording act. It's not like a human is sitting there watching it. It's the fact that there's a recording machine there. So you could say, is that consciousness? Is that measurement? Like, what is... Anyway, it seems very problematic to me. I feel like a lot of pseudoscience is kind of the God of the gaps thing of like, okay, well, we can shove all of our magical presuppositions into this tiny space of the quantum. And there's this uncertainty in there, so we can kind of shove it in there. And yeah, just makes me uncomfortable, so I tend to stay away from it. I would love to do a deeper study on it in future, but for now, I'm just cautious on it. So it was interesting to see the anthrax biology saying that it had a large effect on phenomenology. I'd be curious to see what that effect was. So yeah, that's everything for that question. Thanks for that, Farfetch Tangmo. markuskosmo asks, what is your favorite philosophical question? It's a hard one. I think why. I think why is just a good, solid philosophical question because, it kind of covers most bases really. Because even interpersonally, it's a great question because it's always taking you to a deeper level. And in engineering, there's part of the lean tools for startup companies, I think. There's one technique called 5 whys, which is you go 5 layers deep with asking the question why, kind of developing out of Socrates and the Socratic method. And I think just asking why is just incredibly powerful of those things that are just assumed, the things you go through life and take for granted. All of a sudden you can get to a deeper level just by going, why? Why is this thing? Why is this a thing? So I think, probably because my fundamental philosophical virtue at the moment is curiosity and asking, rather than looking at things from a technical point of view, it's quite often just interesting to go, well, why does that person think that way? So trying to more get into people's perceptions rather than get down to some logical or truth-oriented brass tacks is I'm fairly curious as to why people are thinking certain things and why there is such a diversity of thoughts out there and why these things collide. So I think why is kind of a catch-all for my favorite philosophical question. So yeah, I hope that's a satisfactory answer, Marcus. Next up is user RT3SS2MN2T. What to use the best academic introduction to philosophy? I haven't really read any academic introductions to philosophy, I don't think. One that comes to mind when I was thinking about this question was Bertrand Russell's History of Philosophy. That strikes me as probably a good choice. But the way I got into philosophy, after reading Camus' Myth of Sisyphus, I had written down all these names that he mentioned, Dostoevsky, Zarathustra, Nietzsche, and I got a piece, I don't know actually, do I still have that piece of paper? Because it was so pivotal, because I took that piece of paper, I went to Wikipedia and just started looking up these names and then just ended up down this rabbit hole and just following the things that tickled my curiosity, having like 100 tabs open in Wikipedia and just slowly connecting the dots in the history of philosophy. So that really was a passion drawing me down a rabbit hole. Maybe the trouble with that is you're going to get an incomplete account. So there's probably still parts in the history of philosophy that I'm filling in the gaps on now, which maybe reading something like Bertrand Russell's History of Philosophy might have saved me from. On the other hand, I suppose anyone's going to have their biases when they're writing a book like that, but I remember reading his chapter on Nietzsche, and I suppose, this is only, 20, 30 years after Nietzsche, maybe probably a bit more. So yeah, but he just lacked all subtlety and really didn't understand Nietzsche. And I think he had a slightly better grasp on Heidegger, or maybe he wrote about Heidegger somewhere else. But anyway, I think that would be a good introduction. So it's probably, not a great question or not a great answer, because I haven't got the experience. I haven't read that many of those books, so that's my best attempt at an answer. Also, I do really like Alain de Botton, like his books on philosophy. He had a BBC documentary series where he just looked at Epicurus, Marx, and Nietzsche, which was fascinating, really amazing. Loved that back when I was getting into philosophy. And he had a book, The Consolations of Philosophy, which is good reading. So yeah, that's everything I have to say about that one. Next up, we've got seemoremoreable, who says, the worth of this channel is more than subscribe number. Please keep going. Cool, thank you. I appreciate that. I will keep going. Art Lover 7770 says, I was the 100k. I don't actually think he was. Says he publicly subscribed to the channel 2 weeks ago, and it's only a week since. So I don't know, Art Lover. Did you set up a different account with which you got to this 100k, or I don't know. So something to think about. DobbyIsAGoofElf asks, eternal recurrence. Did Nietzsche actually believe in this? Or was it a sort of litmus test for him and others to determine whether they were living the life they intended? So for a long time, I did read it as the latter, as this thought experiment for, like litmus test is a brilliant way of putting it, of whether that's the life that you're living. The more I've read about Nietzsche, though, the more I think we know he was trying to write a new tablet of values. He was like the revaluation of all values was to be him coming up with a new tablet of values that would be life affirming and have Dionysian elements in it and wouldn't be life denying in the way that the ascetic philosophies are and ascetic religions. And when you read the way he talks about the eternal recurrence throughout his later books. And the same with the will to power. It seems like these are the building blocks of a new metaphysics. So he genuinely believes that these things are real and that this is actually the nature of the universe. Yeah, I wouldn't swear by that, but it seems like he's doing more than just treating it as a litmus test. And I think these are fundamental building blocks of his later philosophies. I think he genuinely believed it. Someone might correct me on that, but as far as I can tell, he was a believer in that and the will to power, that this was the nature of the universe for Nietzsche, which has really interesting implications because he's considered this atheist who kind of killed God, even though he just announced the death of God, but is actually trying to build something new, a project which I've kind of been following on through and seeing how that could influence the politics of 40, 50 years later in the mid 20th century, and how Jung is part of that, and this new idea of a new religion is an interesting thing that I'm kind of getting a bit more distance from and objectivity on, and beginning to see the historical element of that idea rather than just the historical trend of the death of God and the need for rebirth out of nihilism. So yeah, I think he was a believer. So thank you. Interesting question. It's actually DobbyIsAGoofElf. I think I said good elf. It's GoofElf. Seekers of Unity, incredible work, brother. What's been Seekers of Unity, by the way, was the channel that for those of you who don't know, there was a big massive philosophy collaboration that Zivi, the Seekers of Unity channel guy, runs, and he just organized together with organized this thing where all the philosophy channels on YouTube basically, or a big chunk of them, made just a video on what do they think the value of philosophy is today. So really fascinating compilation of things. And so Zivi, Seekers of Unity, asks or says, incredible work, brother. What's been the most rewarding and challenging part of creating your incredible channel? Thank you for the compliment in that, Zivi. It's definitely the creative process. That was what drew me to YouTube in the first place. Was I kept getting caught in my own, I'm trying to write something and I want it to be perfect, and then it would just take longer and longer to write something. And I did a podcast with my friend Barry called The Living Myth in the summer of 2020, and it was just like the ideas were pouring out, and I was like, oh, video format, this is incredible. And so that was the sparking idea that later in the year led to me starting the Living Philosophy YouTube channel, and did 100 videos in 100 days, and it just bypassed my whole problem with the creative process. And by the end of that 100-day period, I had a backlog. I had a few extra days. So as I moved from a video a day to 2 videos a week, I kind of had that bit of wiggle room, and then I moved to a video a week, and over time that's moved to a video every 2 weeks, and there was a while there it was a video every 3 weeks. But yeah, I think just as I moved out of that spontaneous just flow of the 100 days, I was reconfronted with the creative struggle. And that's something, I got better at it. And I think having an audience then and feeling like it was part of something with the YouTube channel made it a lot easier. But yeah, it just took so long. And I feel like for a lot of the last year, I've been really deliberately focused on it, working with the program Obsidian and trying to get around, just new ways to get into this creative process and how to go about writing. So I finally feel like I'm getting to a place where that's beginning to click together. And so I feel like the channel can maybe go to new heights. Like there's new possibilities now, because my big bottleneck before was writing. Like I never had a script beyond that weekend script, and quite often I was video editing right up to the knife edge of releasing it, and sometimes the release got delayed. But it felt like I could only push the video editing so far because I was trying to get this creative thing. And I did try last year to maybe take a longer time, take a month, and just make something more impressive and put everything into it. But then the creative process just elongated. Is it Parkinson's law that the time you have will expand to, or the task you have will expand to fill the time that you've got. So yeah, I feel like maybe now I've got a handle on it, which means that there's new possibilities in what we can do. So it's definitely been the most challenging, but as you say, rewarding. It's been incredibly rewarding because it feels like soul work. It is soul work, and I can see how that shows up in my dreams and how this ongoing struggle, the theme, there's been a theme in my dreams over the last year, 2 years, but last year especially, kind of working with that, like consciously, and trying to get through that struggle. And yeah, I think finally now finding a creative flow. So yeah, such a critical part, incredibly rewarding, and also incredibly challenging, because it's something I've always had. Going back to school, like I remember always in school just struggling to do the work, because I have this, I don't know, my hunger for knowledge, and then my wanting more and more things, opening, kind of conflicts with this desire. I think there's a perfectionism that comes into it as well, of like trying to like boil it down to something. And university, I didn't do the best because, again, that's that same struggle. So it feels like closing a lot of gyres, as Yeats would put it, closing a lot of circles to finally be coming to this point. So incredibly rewarding. So thanks for that question, Ziva. Next question is from Patrick Clark, 3288. Do you think that Nietzsche's philosophy was in any way shaped by the bitterness he felt about the lack of recognition he got during his lifetime? I know he asserted that it's impossible to separate the philosopher or the philosophy from the philosopher. So I don't actually... So I don't think that that's the case. And the reason why I say that is I think Nietzsche found a good workaround. I often think of the struggles that we meet in life. Your ego's got a certain shape, and you meet a certain struggle, and it makes you question yourself. And so your ego has to reshape itself. It's got to reform its boundaries so that it can find a homeostasis again. So it can find like a comfort point. And I think the way Nietzsche did that with not getting any recognition, because Nietzsche self-published all his books, and maybe the first one might have got published, The Birth of Tragedy, but then that was just panned by everyone in the philological department. And yeah, he became a persona non grata in the university. So yeah, maybe the first one was, but the rest of his books were all self-published and paid for at his own expense. So definitely didn't get recognition, but I think the way he put that to himself was, he's not speaking to the public at large. He's speaking to his few kindred spirits, the free spirits who are like him, who will be his future readers, the philosophers of the future. So he's speaking to such a tiny audience, and he's speaking so directly to them, that I don't know that he was actively bothered by not getting massive public recognition. I think it was really validating when he found out. The lecturer in Denmark, who was also the lecturer who had the first series on Kierkegaard, as far as I know, but he was Brands, but he started doing a course on Nietzsche, and that was maybe 1888, 1889, so just the year or two before Nietzsche went mad. So Georges Brand, I think that was his name. So that was the beginning of Nietzsche getting recognition, and I think that must have been incredibly validating, but I don't think that was as much of a crippling influence on him as, say, Lou Salome, the unrequited love of Lou Salome. I think that was something that really forced him to wrestle with rancor and bitterness, and especially considering there was a breakdown of a friendship with Paul Ray there, and Lou going off with his friend Paul Ray, and yeah, Nietzsche really confessed his love and gave in completely to his love for her, and then to have that rejected. I think that's and it's interesting if you dig into that, like that Nietzsche had this idea. I think she was cautious because she'd heard him say to someone else, or maybe Paul Ray told her that he said this to someone else, something about like women's place, and and how he was looking for a wife for blah blah blah. Kind of red pillish kind of stuff. And yeah, Lou Salome did not want to be tied down. She wanted to have her own mind kind of breathe and free and develop. And she later became one of Freud's students. She became one of the very early psychoanalysts and had a relationship with the great poet Rilke. And Rilke was a lot younger than her. So again, kind of, he couldn't threaten her intellectual identity, which was much more formed at that point, whereas you go back to 1882, 1883, which is what we'll say 20, 25 years earlier, there was a danger that, she could just get locked into a marriage and playing second fiddle to someone. So I think she had a lot of feelings for Nietzsche, or so it seems to me, or at least there's some mutual strong energy there. But yeah, anyway, I think that shook Nietzsche, and it took a lot for him to recover from that. And I think that's where the eternal recurrence comes out. We get the death of God, we get the will to power, thus spoke Zarathustra. That's all coming out of the 2 years after Lou broke his heart. So I think that experience probably would have crippled him a lot more. So that would be my take anyway. So let me know what you think, Patrick. Next question is from nfiens9458. Great work. I'm really happy for you. Why do you think there's been a separation between science and philosophy these past few years? And I clarified with this with Enfiens, just by the last few years he meant 19th, 20th century. So the last couple of centuries. I think what came to my mind when I think about this was Thomas Kuhn's work. And Thomas Kuhn was the guy that popularized the term paradigm, kind of like Foucault's hypotheses, like that science never reaches final truth. It's on this journey of developing a better model of the world. And that came to my mind, and also Ian McGilchrist's idea of like the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, which I imagine we'll cover in an episode at some point as well. Again, made a Patreon episode kind of give an early summary of that. But yeah, left hemisphere from McGilchrist. So McGilchrist is a neuroscientist. He spent 20 years putting together work on hemisphere differences, because hemisphere differences they'd lost all scientific credibility because of the popularization of left versus right hemisphere in the 70s, 80s. And that being complete, nonsense, basically. So it was not considered wasn't a good subject to study if you were looking to become a serious scientist. But McGilchrist, professor at Oxford, took 20 years writing the book, The Master and His Emissary, and first half of that book puts together this argument based on all these different neuroscientific studies, because obviously different areas of the brain have still been studied. So he kind of did this analysis of all the studies that have been published and was able to say, well, here's what we're seeing in the left hemisphere, here's what we're seeing in the right hemisphere. So was able to kind of, in a roundabout way, figure out what it was based on all this other research. And left hemisphere is kind of this self-contained, like the blinkers are on and it's focused on a goal. It's operating within a paradigm. It's very much, it's not actually connected to the world. So like the right hemisphere is embodiedness. It's the connotations of language, but it's actually taking in new information. So these overlap as well with Jordan Peterson's chaos and order. So left hemisphere is very much order. It's this representation of the world. It's a model of the world, and it's working within that of like, okay, here's the way the world is, and here's my goal. So here's the point we want to get to. Whereas the right hemisphere is this bigger picture. It's much more open-ended, and it's trying to let in new information, or it is taking in new information all the time. So it's like a living thing, whereas the left hemisphere is this map of the world that's kind of like crystallized, and so it's a representation of the world. So it'll get fed in new information from the right hemisphere, which it can use to update its model, but the model is always at least one remove away from actual experience. So I think what's happened is that science has, the paradigm has become more and more enshrined, and it's more and more representation of the world, because as more and more the gaps have been filled in, it's become much more solid in itself. I think if you look back at the early 20th century of physics, then you can see a lot more. There's a great writer on Substack called Superb Owl who does these great look at the physicists and the great quantum physicists and their philosophical views and their spiritual views. And there's really interesting, look at, like, even you just think of Oppenheimer's I've become death, the destroyer of worlds, which is a quote from the Bhagavad Gita, but all these different quantum thinkers had these like very interesting philosophies, very interesting views of the world, and there were as much philosophers, and this goes for Einstein as well, there were as much philosophers as there were physicists. And I think that's kind of been lost, and you have people like Stephen Hawking and Neil deGrasse Tyson who are just like, yeah, philosophy is more or less is dead. And I was watching Kurt J. Mungel's Theories of Everything. He had Neil deGrasse Tyson on at some point, and I was watching it and I was like, oh my god, this is pace, because Kurt J. Mungel was pushing Neil deGrasse Tyson in this, because he was like, what are you talking about with the philosophy thing? And Neil deGrasse Tyson's just like, well, we don't need philosophers. And yeah, Kurt was kind of really pushing back on him, and yeah, it was really cringy with Neil deGrasse Tyson. It was painful watching, because he just the arrogance and the closed-mindedness. And yeah, John Mungle was just kind of pointing out, well, like, you need philosophy and physics, and there's all these guys making these contributions, blah, 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 brings up Carlo Rovelli and that relational theory of quantum mechanics, that relational interpretation. And deGrasse is like, yeah, but they're not like, they weren't trained in philosophy. It's like, yeah, but they're philosophies of physics, like they're doing philosophy within physics, and Tyson just couldn't get it anyway. But I think when it comes to moving beyond the current paradigm, that's when philosophy is required. Because again, think of what a paradigm is. You have a paradigm, Kuhn tells us, is you're given an exemplar. You're given, here's a model of the world, and here's an ideal, an exemplary solution to a problem. So it tells you what a problem looks like, and it tells you where to look for the solution. So that's kind of, the philosophical work is done when you're operating in normal science. But when it comes to revolutionary science, then yeah, that's when all this other work needs to be done. And yeah, when I was watching the Neil deGrasse Tyson thing, I was like, there is no unified theory of everything. It almost, like, what of the contributions? I know a lot of work has been done on string theory, but like, there's been no real breakthrough in science, in physics, for a very long time. There's been incremental breakthroughs within the paradigm, but there's been no major shifts, like nothing like, yeah. I'm getting out of my pay grade. I'm heading into the waters of quantum mechanic philosophy, but it just seems to be that there has, or I've seen people talk about how there hasn't been a major contribution in physics, in the way of, if you look at up to we go 1940s back to the start of the 19th century, it was just insight after insight, like the laws of thermodynamics coming around, and just these incredible thinkers who were like, the paradigm shifted so much. And then you had Einstein, and then you had quantum mechanics, and there was this breakthrough after breakthrough after breakthrough, and you can see why there was this enthusiasm and this sense in the 19th century that science was all wrapping up. Whereas for the last, let's say 80 years, we've kind of been living with the fact of like, oh, okay, we've got something that works at the very small level and something that works at a very big level, and we don't know how to get those to connect. And there's no real, obviously string theory was a great new attempt, but there's been no actual proof of that. There's been no experimental proof of it, and it's still not worked out. So it really seems like this gap can't be bridged. So there's a desperate need for philosophy, I think, there, because when it comes to moving beyond your paradigm and into like having to ask new questions and having to think new ways and having to make judgment calls and having to go through John Vervaeke's like the relevance realization to look in the field of possibilities for a new formulation, then that becomes very, very important. This philosophical work of critical thinking, of thinking outside that box, becomes very, very important. And I feel like if there's an arrogance like Neil deGrasse Tyson's that's quite common in that domain, then you're just going to get this left hemispheric, like being sealed in that paradigm, and be like resting on the laurels. And it made me think back to, Aristotle was so impactful in the Islamic world, triggering the Islamic Golden Age, and in turn the 13th century Renaissance in Europe, leading to the scientific revolution in the 17th century. Probably will have a video on that and how, like the Renaissance did not cause the scientific revolution. If anything, it was an interlude. Scientific revolution is really a continuation on from the work of the scholastics in the 13th century and importing the tradition from Islamic philosophy, which had made so many strides. But if you look at the ancient world from Aristotle, so we're talking, what's that, 4th century, maybe into the 3rd century BC. And there was a stagnation in science. Aristotle was really the one that got picked up, even though the ancient world continued for another 300, 400, 500 years. It kind of just stagnated, and you had these reworkings of old theories of Aristotelian theories and Platonic theories, and it just seemed like science stagnated. And so I wonder, is there a possibility for a certain stagnation into a certain paradigm that could happen even now? And that if, let's say, the world, there was a collapse in 500 years of this civilization, and then the thread was picked up another 500 years later, would they go back to, would there be major contributions in the next 300 or 400 years, or is that contribution ended already? Have we kind of like peaked with the major insights? Are the broad brushstrokes there? Now, again, just a thought, not a fully or deeply developed one, but just a kind of a musing that maybe I'm thinking about. I need to talk about spiral dynamics on the channel, but the developmental level of civilization, deciding what level of science can emerge at a certain point. Like Darwin's theory came at that time because it was ripe to come at that time. It was the 50 years earlier, Hegel had been talking about history and the historical point of view being so important, and we didn't just need to look at things as they were now. We actually needed to take a historical developmental point of view. And Darwin was in no way, as far as I know, influenced by Hegel at all. I think it was his time for this developmental mindset, and then Darwin's kind of like coming into the zeitgeist. So the zeitgeist had made it ready for a Darwin to emerge, and Darwin just happened to be the Darwin. But Alfred Russel Wallace was also making the same insight on the other side of the world. So it's this idea of convergent discovery seems to me is maybe a byproduct of a development in the worldview that makes possible new advancements in science. So developmental perspective on scientific thinking. This is all very tentative stuff, but I guess that's how I'd answer it, as a separation between science and philosophy has come because science has become more sealed in its container, and the paradigm is offering more and more finer grained possibilities. So there's because of the new tools we're developing, there's still so much of the nitty gritty of science that can now be worked out within the paradigm that, like, the big questions, for some reason, are just not being bridged. They're not being really tackled. And this is coming from a complete lay person in science. So I could be completely off base here and could be completely missing a lot. And I am, as much as possible, trying to keep abreast of the new developments in science, because I'm very curious. Always loved physics, always very curious about it. So from what I can see, it's just there's no major shifts. But anyway, that's my thinking. I won't be surprised if AI could test out all these new models and maybe come up with something, or with humans interacting like a co-pilot with that. Maybe vast computational powers is what's needed to make the breakthrough. Anyway, I've rambled enough on that one to no satisfactory answer, but it's a good question, and it's something I would love to have more knowledge on to competently answer at some point. So thanks for that. Next question is from Matthew Selmers, 3678. How do you think philosophy has shaped the trajectory of your life from youth to present day? In what way do you think your life would be different if you had never ventured down the path to knowledge? So this is something that I talked about a lot in the 10K episode, where I talked about how I got into philosophy and how philosophy for me came out of it found me at a time of incredible importance when I was just coming out like a deep darkness in my teenage years. And there's the book The Outsider was at home. My dad and my brother recommended it to me, read that, and then I wanted to read more Camus. It was just like, I need to read more of this guy. My dad had the same impression after reading The Outsider and had bought a load of Camus books and found them impenetrable. But one of them was The Myth of Sisyphus, and I read that, and first page, the only true philosophical problem is suicide, and that was kind of game over for me from there. So that was kind of a dramatic transformational moment, and from there I got into philosophy and I got into spirituality and discovered so much at that time that radically transformed who I was. And that's kind of continued to now. Like, even for me, the discovery of Jung in my 20s, Nietzsche at that time, like, I was always reading philosophers for how they could transform my life. And only in the last few years, I guess, with the channel, have I started to really look beyond the horizon of myself and the sort of self-actualization, and I'm beginning to think the bigger picture with philosophy, thinking about the social level of things. I mean, I was into anarchism and stuff when I was in my early 20s as well. The more political side as well, and reading Marx as a teenager, just the Communist Manifesto. But the political side wasn't what grabbed me. It was always about the living of the philosophy. So philosophy's been incredibly impactful, and I feel like that's in my bones now whenever I'm interacting with anything. And the need for transformation, kind of magician archetype energy that comes to that. So philosophy's been incredibly impactful. It's kind of been everything. It's very hard to imagine what my life would be like without it, because it just seems like it would be. I can't even really imagine it. As for if I didn't go down the path of knowledge, so it's interesting to look back on what else growing up from being a kid, or other career paths that I thought. In school, we had this yearbook that I found at home, my parents, about it was just a yearbook from school, and one of the questions in it was from like 12, when we were 12 years old, so leaving primary school. And one of the questions was, what would you like to be when you grow up? And I said a professional football player, which is a soccer player, which is laughable to anyone who knows me or has seen me play football. But I think it was very much just being influenced by my brothers. We used to play a lot of soccer growing up, and I guess mimetically, like, see the people around me and being so shaped by the world around me, that seemed to be which there's actually a funny story with so Man United was the team my brothers were mad about and I was mad about, and being in school and other kids also support Man United. My way of getting into it was, like, I read this history of Man United from, like, when it founded as Newton Heath back in the 1880s, and chatting to a friend, and he was like, well, you don't need to know any of that, like, it's about the game now. And I was like, no, because without the history we wouldn't have what we have now. And so I was still, even when I thought that what I was into was wanting to be a football player, it was like I that intellectual thing and the historical thing was there for me. So I found a way to get into that through the way my own mind works. So that's an interesting one. I also wanted to be an Egyptologist after watching Egypt Week. Thought I'd find the new Tutankhamun. I wanted to be a theoretical physicist until I got to the end of Stephen Hawking's book and didn't understand it. I was like, I'm not smart enough to do that. Not smart enough to make a contribution. So, I think it was even that I wasn't smart enough to be the greatest. Funny, there was an arrogance there. So I gave up on that. Wanted to be an architect until I worked in an architect's office for a week and realized that it wasn't all about building skyscrapers and amazing bridges. It was mostly about redesigning pubs in Limerick. which kind of bored me. So I got over that. There was something else I wanted to be as well. But yeah, kind of these different... Oh yeah, I want to be a genetic engineer for a time when I was a teenager. Thought I'd make a unicorn with a narwhal's horn crossed with a horse. Yeah, all these different dreams. But so like science was there at times, the historical thing was kind of there at times. So it's interesting kind of like breadth of interest. So I would have followed curiosity, I guess, and I would have followed like wanting to know about a subject. So I imagine I would have been, academically inclined anyway, and very much fascinated by some field of study. But I feel like philosophy just hits every single part of me, just everything that I'm interested in. And all my strengths kind of come, it's just like the perfect place, ikigai kind of thing. So, I think that it's hard to know, but I imagine maybe an academic or a researcher of some sort. There was an extra comment with that. Love your channel, by the way. As a 19-year-old student who's lost in the world, your content sent me down a path that changed my perspective and totally remodulated my thinking. Thank you. That means so much to me to hear. It's just incredible to hear. It's humbling. So I'm really glad what I do can have some positive impact for some people in the world. So I'm really grateful to hear. Thank you for sharing that. Next one is from Motorlizard. Congratulations on 100k, massive milestone. Feels like it was just yesterday when your channel was starting out with just a few thousand subs. So this is Bill Lizard. I went back through the comments on YouTube and was able to find that Bill congratulated me on reaching 2,000 subscribers, and I can see the milestones along the way where he was congratulating me. So it's always nice when I reach a milestone, because I know Bill will come on and wish me congratulations. So really appreciate that, Bill, and thank you for sharing the journey with me over probably 99,000 of those subscribers. It's really cool, and it's nice to have that connection, that reminder of those early days and so long ago. It's and yet so short ago in some ways, and I still completely feel like I'm just coming to grips with this. I really feel like I haven't found my stride with YouTube yet, which is probably good if we're hitting 100k already. But I think the pieces are just beginning to come together for me. So this is. It's cool to think back to that now, and now to think forward another few years. So thanks for that, Bill. I really appreciate that. Next is from desemplem. I've recently looked at some books discussing the nature of Nietzsche's takes on gender and race. Following some diligent research, I've only found Julius Evola to give an accurate picture of what Nietzsche is describing. Do you know of Julius Evola? And if so, can we get a video on them? I know of Julius Evola only from comments of people talking about him on my channel before. There's someone else I got him confused with. Dugan, is it Alexander Dugan? But in my mind that's who I was going to talk about till I looked him up again. I was like, oh no, this is the Italian fascist guy, whereas Dugan is the Russian guy who's working now. So Julius Evola, it seems to be interesting because he's Italian fascisty kind of philosopher, but he also seems to have a cult interest, like very it seems to be kind of from what I can see, a kind of conspirituality. I really want to talk about this. I find it hard to get a grip on it, but like what really fascinates me is where the hippie subculture, which is so, you think of as being this peace and love and kind of just, over the top placidity kind of thing. But then it's somehow, when it becomes political, it's fascist. So with like the Nazis, Evola and Mussolini and stuff, and then with the whole with the pandemic thing, just there was an interesting thing where the friends in the hippie subculture kind of went more and more towards this real radical anti-authoritarian, not trusting, kind of a paranoia kind of emerging with the world. And yeah, that really fascinates me. So Evola might be interesting to look at that kind of connection, that overlap. I was talking with friends Barry and David last night about this, and yeah, David was making the point that it's like they're really libertarian, and so the libertarian thing is an interesting point, because if they're it's like they want minimal government interaction. They just kind of want to be free of all that. It's this thing about freedom, and so there's that libertarianism go either far left or far right, and then I guess there's a connection to blood and the land that comes with the fascist thing. There's an interesting confluence of things going on there. So I would like to study Evola. Didn't realize he talked about Nietzsche, so I'd be curious to see what he says about Nietzsche and gender and race. So yeah, we'll see at some point. I have no immediate plans though, so it could be a couple of years. We'll see. Next question is from MrJibsIV. What's your favorite pizza topping? This one's probably I'm going to get a lot of hate from Italians, but my favorite pizza topping is actually pineapple. It's class. I love pineapple on pizza. That is all. Levi-we6 is, do you have any thoughts on the conceited / arrogant / pedantic / pseudo-intellectual young man armchair philosopher stereotype? You seem very different from the stereotype, and I'm curious if that was intentional. This is a really interesting question, because this got me into a lot of self-reflection, because I was that. So yeah, I very much was, maybe not conceited, but definitely the arrogant, the pedantic, pseudo-intellectual. All of those things I've been at different times, including conceited. Different degrees at different times. I think when I first got into philosophy, going to university, I just used to have these philosophical arguments with everyone, and yeah, kind of makes me cringe looking back. And I think throughout my 20s, I still had this idea of like, oh, I want to be the greatest philosopher ever. And it's interesting. It's only as I've gotten more, I guess, how it's turned more into a career. It's turned more into something that is part of my everyday life, and that is my work. The more, and I think about Jung and his idea of compensation. So the more it's become a reality, the less I need to have that inflated goal. So the more it's a reality, the more the size of me can kind of come down, and I'm like, okay, I might never make a contribution. I might never really push any boundaries maybe in philosophy. Maybe I will. But it's less important to me now, because it's just the love of philosophy. So like I'm getting into it. It's humbling, and yeah. And so I think that's one thing that came to me as why that's decreased. Just this observation that my philosophical ego has really come down to size. I think the other big thing for me has been studying people that I don't necessarily agree with. And I think that's come through the channel of like following my curiosity of like, I want to know more about the history of philosophy, and then wanting to get into the perspectives of these different people rather than just giving an outsider's summary. Something that's really important to me is passing the ideological Turing test. So Turing test being something from AI, I think it was Marvin Minsky that came up. Oh no, it's Alan Turing, of course. Alan Turing had this idea of like, you will know something is intelligent, like we'll know artificial intelligence is actually intelligent when a human can't tell it apart. Like if a human and the artificial intelligence are chatting, and someone watching the conversation doesn't know which one is the AI. And I mean, now we've passed that threshold, but it's still, I think the idea with the ideological Turing test is being able to talk to someone who holds a different ideology to you, who has a different worldview to you, and being able to represent their worldview well enough that they don't know that yours is different to theirs, that they think you share their worldview. And so that means you've like the likes of Stephen Hicks, Jordan Peterson, James Lindsay are not going to pass that ideological Turing test. What you talking about, Puss? Hold. Yeah. This is the cat. Anyway, I'm getting completely distracted. Yeah, I think the thing with the ideological Turing test is being able to actually get into the perspective of others and being able to like understand that. And so I think that's been so important to me, because it means that I'm getting... It's been humbling because I have to try and understand it, and Kuhn talks about like penetrating Aristotle's paradigm. He said first time he read Aristotle, he was like, this is complete nonsense. But he was teaching him as part of a lecture series, and he said at a certain point it just clicked, and he just got Aristotle's perspective, and he could see Aristotle no longer seemed ridiculous, because now he could see the world that Aristotle was seeing. And I think there's something about getting into that paradigm and getting into the worldview of people. And so I think trying to do that more and more, and finding that so difficult, like trying to actually get into, because not just trying to intellectually understand it from the standpoint of my own current paradigm, but trying to expand my range of paradigms by getting into the perceptions of others. That's been I think really humbling, and has really brought me down to size. So I think it's hard to be arrogant when you're really confronted with how little you know. And it's really humbling. So I think I think I have maybe developed through that stereotype. I think that stereotype comes from, maybe there's a fascination as well. This is another thing. When you first get into something, you imitate your idols, you imitate your heroes in that. Nietzsche talked about this as when a higher civilization meets a lower civilization, the lower civilization will imitate the vices first. So alcohol and Christianity or narcotics and Christianity was what Nietzsche said was the Western world's gift. But whatever about civilizations, but if you look at that in terms of people, when you come into a new domain, then there's a fascination with the greats, with the person that you look up to. And so you can see, it'd be interesting studying Marx and realizing how much whatever about his arguments, but his tone, the vitriolic tone is almost what's been imitated. And that sense of we're at war and we need to change the world seems to have been what's imitated. And that's really quite interesting. So I think as you get deeper into something, then you find yourself. So you go from trying to be like that philosopher to being more and more who you are. And this applies to any domain, whether it's sports, business, or any intellectual domain. So yeah, I think as I've gotten more into it, I can see that coming down to size and feeling like it's become more of a reality. The compensation has come down. I've become more humble as I'm trying to get into those perceptions. But there's also this, I've become me, I guess. I've become who I am rather than an imitation of Nietzsche or an imitation of Jung or something like that. I'm finding my own thing. And so I can move away from that pseudo, that try hard, that imitation thing. But I think that imitation thing, as much as you look back on it, I find it painful. Another Nietzsche line was that when I was young, it all seemed so... No, I can't remember that one. It's been years since I thought about that one. But it's basically, it all seems like youth. And then you get older and you're looking back on it if it's youth, and you realize even that perception of looking back is youth. So hopefully someday soon I will look back in this answer and cringe and feel like I'm still being arrogant or pedantic or pseudo-intellectual, because it means that it's a journey and it's a development. So yeah, I'm glad to hear that I don't come across like that as much. But yeah, I think there's just a temptation to seriousness and inflation. And if you're getting feedback from that, then sometimes you can get bloated with that. But I think I get checked by my attempt to try and read these other things. I am cautious about, at some point, developing more certainty. I think that could be dangerous. Because, yeah, anyway, separate point. But Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Last question is from Varun Vibeen. What role has religion played in your life? Will you be covering Indian philosophy in the future? Are you currently in university or plan to go back to enhance your academic knowledge of philosophy? I'm going to answer those in reverse. I'm not in university at the moment. I have thought about getting a PhD in philosophy. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I was looking at getting a PhD in psychology. Because, I wanted to become a Jungian. And I wanted, apparently it can sometimes be, I was looking at a master's and then maybe a PhD. But now I would love the idea of doing a thesis and figuring out a different way of interacting with philosophy, coming from an academic, going deep for one thing rather than YouTube going broad for a lot of things, or at least that's the way I do YouTube anyway. That really appeals to me, but I've no immediate plans. Not in the next 5 years anyway. Interesting thought, but no, at the moment, no plans on going back to university. Will I be covering Indian philosophy in the future? Yes, I think so. I'm more drawn to Chinese philosophy at the moment. I really want to talk about Confucius and probably do a bit on Taoism, but the cultural backdrop of the emergence of Confucianism and Taoism at the time of the War and States period in Chinese history. So we're talking about 2,400 years ago. That really fascinates me, and Confucius as philosophy really fascinates me as to where it could fit in today, and the idea of actually having this philosopher who makes a social program that actually ends up transforming the world in time of crisis is quite inspiring, even if I think definitely when I was younger I would have found everything about him, all his actual philosophy, questioning and off-putting, but now I'm curious to see what I think. So Confucius, interested, like with Indian philosophy, I'd love to talk about Nagarjuna. I'd love to make an episode on him. Love to cover some stuff with the Buddha and all that. But really, it's a whole other paradigm, and maybe also it seems more metaphysically oriented, which could be interesting in its own way. But I think at the moment I'm still really coming to grips with Western philosophy, Chinese philosophy, because as some Chinese friends that I met on the Camino informed me, there's really not very much Chinese philosophy because it's quite an oppressive environment, probably because of Confucian values. It's a really oppressive environment for philosophy. So I'm quite curious to study that. I feel like Indian philosophy is just so rich and so deep. It seems like its own tradition, as deep as the Western tradition. I would like to get into it at some point. If you are looking for some of that stuff, the YouTube channel Seeker to Seeker has been releasing some great stuff on Indian philosophy or Buddhist philosophy. Long video, 50 minutes on the Buddhist concept of emptiness that he released last week, which is going to be well worth watching if you're into that. And finally, what role has religion played in your life? So obviously being Irish, a Catholic. So but I remember before my communion going to my mom and being like, I'm not sure I believe in all this Jesus stuff, and she was like, you won't get any money if you say that. And I was like, okay, I'm a believer. I was definitely a kid that was fascinated with science, and apparently did not have a particularly strong value system. But I was much more fascinated with the scientific worldview. Got me. The religious thing never really took root in me from a young age. I only really got into religion in my late teenage years through spirituality, reading Anthony de Mello's Awareness and Song of the Bird and all the amazing stories he would tell, and realizing this diversity of religious traditions, and reading about Sufism and reading about Zen and getting into meditation and stuff. All of that, I guess, is really what pulled me in. So I then got more into religion. The Jungian thing then sent me even deeper into religion, like a comparative religion. And then me and a friend would we used to meet up with the Mormon missionaries. It was very interesting to hear about their religion, and kind of like to have heard all the stuff about Mormonism, and then to actually have these conversations. And we went to a Pentecostal meeting, and we went to the Quakers. And actually, Quakers was really cool. Of all of them, I think that's the one. And I was talking to a friend on Camino as well. His dad was a Quaker, and he has gone to a good few Quaker meetings and is quite drawn to it, and was talking about the history of it and stuff. And yeah, just being at a Quaker meeting, they were like, and this is just in Limerick, there was like, you could be, someone stood up. So it's Quaker meeting is complete silence, unless someone is inspired to say something. So one person stood up and was like, you could be a Hindu Quaker, you could be a Christian Quaker, you can be a Buddhist Quaker. Quakerism is about your own personal relationship with God. And I was like, that's really cool. That's really interesting. And there's something just about sharing space in that spiritual way without a set of dogmas or doctrines that I would feel very questionable about. So, yeah. But yeah, like the study of religion has really appealed to me. I would say it hasn't had much of an actual effect. Not that it hasn't had much of an actual effect in my life. I've never been really a believer in anything. Buddhism obviously also grabbed me for a long time. There was a point in my early 20s where I wanted to be the youngest ever Buddha, which, as far as the arrogance, conceited pseudo-intellectualism goes, that was pretty mad. Yeah, so yeah, I've been grabbed by it at different times, and it's pulled me in different directions, and through the Jungian thing, really seeking that connection of like the spiritual thing, and yeah, so the spiritual side of religion has always pulled me. So yeah, that's probably about the role that it has played in my life. These traditions have psychotechnologies that I've utilized and partaken of, and it's really interesting to see the diversity of religious traditions as well, and to study religious traditions the way I study philosophies on YouTube, trying to get into their perspective and understand the implications of the worldview, like the effect it has on the individual believing, and also what the worldview is itself and how it gets there. So a little bit of a continuity error. I actually forgot one question. So yeah, it's from Gabriel Allen 790. Goes, I can think of only a few YouTube channels which I'm glad are growing in viewership, and yours is definitely one in that handful. I'd like to hear your hopes/ideals for our world society as it heads into a new age, if you have any to share. If not, are there specific skills or ideas you think will contribute to a most sensible future? In any case, thanks for your work. Even if you stop today, you've raised mine and many others' level of curiosity and understanding for ideas which have cosmic levels of significance. So I really appreciate that. It's a really, yeah, again, really, really meaningful, really nice comment to hear. So thanks for that, Gabriel. And it's actually, yeah, it's a hard question to answer. I've actually recently really been feeling in a state of aporia. Almost constant aporia, just a sense of, yeah, just that kind of drowning in complexity a little bit at the moment. There's so many different worldviews kind of coming at me that I'm immersing myself in, and it's hard to really state with any certainty any prescriptions for the future. So there are advantages to this state, as I've talked about, but there are also disadvantages, which is a kind of a confusion. So I think one thing I would say for hopes/ideals is that I hope there's a decrease in polarity. That is, I hope there's better communication across society, and yeah, I think that's my main thing, is that like people just understanding what other people are talking about more, and I think that has the power to reduce just a lot of the hate and just projections and shadowy shit that's going on. Yeah, I'm a believer that everyone is doing their best, but I think we just get led into misunderstandings and the straw men we draw of our fellow humans lead us towards hate and acting in a certain way towards them. And yeah, so I think increased understanding and that leading to more full and whole philosophies and to more harmonious society. So I think that it's an unsatisfying answer for me at the moment, but it's kind of the best that I've got at the moment. Curiosity being a big part of that. I think going back to that answer, why, my favorite philosophical question, why, trying to understand before we prescribe. So I think that, that's kind of my vague sense of an ideal for the future. So maybe I'd be better off. Yeah. Are there specific skills or ideas you think will contribute to a most sensible future? Yeah, it's funny, at different times I would have said different things. Maybe I might have talked about a revaluation of the gods or a re-emergence of the gods in a Jungian time, or I might have talked about developmental stuff in a meta-modern or integral time. I really don't know right now. I think curiosity is a powerful skill, but I actually don't think that this is not a scalable state. I don't think most people should be in this state because it's too. Yeah, I think that actually there's a lot of us in this state because of drowning in too much information, and that's gamed for negative ends as well in the world. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's good for some people at least to have this curiosity, and I think the role of the philosopher has always been to be thinking differently, to be thinking of other possibilities of the way the world works, and to really be thinking deeply about how the world works and how it might work differently, and how our model of the world might be off. And I think it's important to have that, and I think that there's something in that which runs ahead of the progress of the rest of the culture. So this is a sort of philosopher's faith, I guess you'd call it, whether it's true or not. So not sure how great an answer that is, but that is provisionally in July 2023 where I'm at. So thank you for the question. One had me reflecting the other morning, so it was very worthwhile coming back on and doing another mini recording for it. So thanks for that, Gabriel. I hope that answers your question and all of your questions. I hope this has been somewhat interesting. Thank you for the questions, and again, thank you for all the support for getting the channel to 100k, and really excited to see where we go from here. Really appreciate it. If you've watched this far, I really appreciate you watching this far. I hope it's been enjoyable, and I shall see you soon for some new content and for the beginning of the next chapter of the journey. So thank you for watching. Comments, insights, feedback, leave them down below. Always great to hear from you. And otherwise I shall chat to you soon. Thank you for watching.